Hello, good morning. Welcome to the webinar on the 7 golden keys for a successful EU advocacy, which is today hosted by Chameleon. So Chameleon is an organization who improves in performance through learning. Basically, we provide learning and consultancy services such as management, communication, and other topics such as today advocacy that allows organizations to become more performant, to have a greater impact. So before we start, could you please let us know where you are at the moment? Just write it down on the chat on your right-hand side. Okay, we see some answers coming. So people from Brussels, from The Hague, more people from Brussels, Sweden as well. Okay. Netherlands? Okay, we see a lot of people from Brussels. So I hope you're all enjoying the same amazing sunshine we have here today. So just before we start, a little introduction on our side. Today you're going to have two facilitators, myself and Sandrine. So my name is Anna, and I'm a learning and HR expert. And I have been working in the past a lot with international NGOs and also with companies. And I've been working as a trainer and as a facilitator. And what I do with organizations is that I empower them to make a better use of their human resources. And by doing so, they have a greater impact. So my role here today is to work more on the technical side to support Sandrine, who will be your main trainer today. So Sandrine?
Thank you. Anna. Hello, so my name is Sandrine Grenier. I'm very glad to be with you today. I'm a trainer specialized in EU affairs and advocacy for civil society organizations. And before that, I have been working for 20 years as an advocacy expert for several human rights and social NGOs in Brussels. So I'm glad to see that you are interested in the topic and to see people coming from everywhere. I can even recognize some names and organizations, which is great. So I will start with the objectives of the seminar, which is to share with you useful tips for successful EU advocacy. So I will do a presentation of 35 minutes, and there will be 10 minutes questions. So from our experience, we see that it is very easy to get lost when doing EU advocacy. So we want to share with you some things we have learned throughout our experience and that can turn your EU advocacy work into something very effective. So in order to make the best use of the next 35 minutes, I will focus on giving you tips for successful EU advocacy. And then we will have the 10 minutes for specific questions. So we want to respect the time we have, so we will move quickly into the topic. However, just before that, I want to briefly say what this webinar is not. So it's not a course on the functioning of the EU, because that will be part of a 2 days live training that we're going to organize in Brussels very soon. And it's not either about advocating on a specific issue. However, you have to know that we can offer this kind of thing in the framework of a training which is specifically adapted to the needs of your organization. So now, what is EU advocacy? EU advocacy, what it is first of all a process which aims at influencing EU policies and convincing EU decision makers to act. Its main objective is a change in EU policies, and it is usually for a cause. For instance, I see today there are people working on environmental issues or on social justice or migrants' rights, etc. So it is for a cause. And the last element of advocacy, it is that it includes several actions and the proposal of solutions. So, what is a strategic EU advocacy? You need to be strategic, of course. So for that, you have to always keep in mind that EU advocacy is, first of all, and I insist on that, a process with several regular actions over a certain time period. And as you know, a single action is rarely enough. Secondly, this process is to obtain specific results. It's not enough to raise problems. So you have to clearly and precisely define the results you want to reach. Thirdly, it has to be based on research, on a reliable analysis, and on a good argumentation. It is very important to gain the trust of EU decision makers and to build a relation of confidence. And for that, you should not forget that they also need your support and the information you provide them. So for that, you really need to be reliable. Finally, you need to choose the means and allocate human and financial means where they can have most impact. So you probably have limited resources, so it is important to use them in the most efficient way. The next slide is about the EU puzzle. You know that there are several EU institutions and many EU agencies. You know that the main three EU institutions are the EU Council, the European Commission, and the European Parliament. And for those of you who are working on foreign affairs, you have to add the EU External Action Service. You probably know that these institutions interact between them. But for many people, understanding how they function and how they interact with the policies and legislation is a real puzzle. So the purpose of this seminar is not to go into detail about these institutions' work and how they interact, because this is something that we do in our lives training. But the purpose of this seminar is to give you concrete tips to make your advocacy efforts pay. So at this stage, my advice would be don't waste your resources. Take the time to analyze properly who has the most power to make decisions on your issue and who can make the change you want. This is what we call strategic advocacy. So after this introduction, we start with the golden keys. So the first golden key is to set SMART objectives. So your objective has to be set in a smart way. Some of you know what SMART means, but let me go still into detail. This means that it has to be specific, that the S of SMART. The M of SMART means measurable. The A means achievable. The R means realistic. And the T means timely. So your objective have to be smartly established. Why? Because it is only when you define your objective in this way that you can then establish a strategic action plan, that you can set priorities, that you can use your human and financial resources efficiently, that you can keep focused, and then obtain the result you want. So sometimes we tend to think in terms of action first. That's something I often see in our work, but in order to be efficient, it is important to firstly clearly set your objective before considering the actions to take. So the first thing to do is to firstly identify your big goal. It is usually what we call the long-term vision. And as it is usually big, something very important and very big, it cannot be reached at once. So then it has to be divided into several smaller medium-term objectives. For that, use the step-by-step approach. And this way, it will help you to keep focused and not to be discouraged. Finally, it's important to identify clear achievements that you want to reach in the short term. So the main goal, the overall goal was very long-term or long-term. The objectives are medium-term, and the achievements are really short-term. So that's what you want to achieve in the short term. Focus on them, because it will help you to evaluate the success of your actions as well. and it will keep you motivated, and you will see also then the steps you make. An important thing finally is it is essential to set priorities and to stick to them. I will repeat that several times during the webinar. We often have the tendency in the non-profit sector to consider that everything is important, because everything is important. It's an important cause we work on, but we have to prioritize to be efficient. So it is really key for the success of your actions to remain focused. The second golden key is to clearly identify your targets. So what means the word targets? The targets are the EU institutions you need to approach to reach results. More specifically, they are the bodies you need to approach within an EU institution. For instance, it can be a specific committee in the European Parliament, or a specific Directorate General in the Commission, and even more specifically, a unit in Directorate General in the Commission. And also the persons you define as targets are very important, because a successful advocacy is very much based on a personalized approach. So why is it important to clearly define your targets? So it is essential to precisely define your targets by choosing the institutions, bodies, and persons which have the most power to change things on your issue. And this is, of course, a matter of efficiency and not losing your time. Huh? Another thing, especially when it is a hard issue to obtain the results you want, or when you feel stuck, then you can think of targets who can have an influence, an indirect influence on the main decision makers on your issues. I will give you an example. For instance, the European Parliament, which has no decision-making competence on EU foreign affairs, but which you can use as a loudspeaker to relay your concerns and proposals. Again, I will insist on the fact to set priorities as well, because you need to keep focused to reach your results. Always keep in mind that advocacy is usually a process, and therefore you will usually need to undertake several actions with the same target in order to achieve the result you want. So now the next slide is on how to deal with your targets. So the success of your advocacy will depend on the way you approach them. Firstly, you have to gain their trust by providing reliable material and by developing and maintaining regular personal contacts. So these personal contacts can be done through email, phone calls, face-to-face meetings, etc. And it is only through a respectful, personalized relation that you will manage to influence them over time. Secondly, it is important to inquire about their position, their concerns, their language, their connections to other actors, and then to adapt to it. So in order to influence institutions, you need to influence the persons within these institutions. And for that, you need that they see their interest in changing their policy in the way you want. Thirdly, you need to look for allies within the EU system in order to get their support. And also what is very useful is to obtain from them non-public information. That's key for the advocacy. You also have to find ways to neutralize to bring the neutral ones on the positive side, and to neutralize your opponents through direct or indirect advocacy. Finally, always keep in mind that your voice counts and that the EU decision makers need you. There are several reasons for that. They need you because you provide them with first-hand information that they need. They need you because you represent EU citizens, so potentially also electors. And they need you because you can play a role in the media, and they are very sensitive to their image in the media, etc. So golden key number 3, we move to it now. So the third golden key for successful EU advocacy is to choose the advocacy tools which will have the most impact on your targets. This has, of course, to be done on a case-by-case basis. So what is an advocacy tool? An advocacy tool is the mean you choose to advocate. For instance, it can be a public or private letter, it can be a meeting with an EU official, it can be a press release, it can be a press conference, a speech at the committee of the European Parliament, etc. It is important to produce tailor-made information to the target audience. It happens sometimes that we take a lot of time in our field to produce very good reports, but which and very comprehensive reports, which are great, but we don't reflect enough sometimes what we want to achieve with it, who it is supposed to influence, and when. So sometimes a 5 minutes phone call to a good contact can reach more results than a long, even if it's very good, but than a long report. Another thing, so the last thing I want to say about it is that EU officials and even more EU politicians don't have the time to read long reports. So a very good advocacy tool is usually a one-page letter with 1 or 2 points only, so maximum 3, very well argumented, and you can attach a longer background information document with reliable information and more precise information. And also, something important is to ask for a face-to-face meeting in this letter. Now we move to golden key number 4. So the fourth golden key is to choose a strong, clear, specific, and short message, and it has to be adapted to your target. So it is important in order to reach your target and to have an impact. So again, it is important to always clear in mind that EU representatives have little time, and therefore to keep the message short and clear. Prioritization again is very important. So 1, 2 issues, as I said before, maximum 3, and otherwise your message will be diluted and your interlocutor will get lost. It is also important to simplify the language while at the same time providing reliable information. And of course, it's important to make sure that you speak a language that your interlocutor understands, and I mean it in the literal but also in the figurative sense. And finally, something which I think is very powerful is to refer to EU positions or EU statements or EU regulation on your issue as a basis for your argumentation, in order to show them that they have some commitments on your issue and that they have to act on these commitments. So now we come to golden key number 4, which is to be 5, which is to be timely. So why is it important to take time into consideration? Let me share a story with you. Once I saw an NGO which sent a letter to EU member states and to their permanent representations in Brussels, but just 1 or 2 days before a meeting of a council working group where this issue was planned to be discussed. So the NGO sent it to the right people, to the right target, in the proper format, and the message was well written, but unfortunately it was useless because the timing was wrong. So each EU member state prepares its position in advance of a council working group's meeting, and their position is usually the result of an exchange between their Brussels permanent representation and the capital. So in order to have an impact, the letter should have been sent at least around 1 week before the working group's council meeting, and you need to take this process and time for it into account. So as a result, the letter was unfortunately read too late by the member states representative, and this point could not be taken into account. So then if you are sending or if you are too late with preparing a letter and that you think it would be sent too late to have an influence, then you can think of alternatives. For instance, You can make a phone call to a very good contact in a permanent representation of a member state who is participating in the Council Working Group's meeting the next day. And if it's a good contact, he will listen to, or she will listen to your points and can raise the points the next day at the last minute. So this example shows that it is essential to adapt the timing of your action to the EU calendar and EU decision-making process within the EU system on your issue. And this, of course, has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. I will give another example. If you want to influence a programming document of the Commission, it is much easier and impactful to do it at the early stage of the first drafting of the document by the civil servant who is in charge of it. If you do that afterwards, then the process of consultation within the Commission will have started, and it would be much more difficult to influence. So for these reasons, you really need to get information on the calendar of adoption of a policy in each EU institution. And some information is public, some is not. So you also have to activate your personal contacts to get the non-public information. The golden key number 6, we come to it now. It is to build alliances with other civil society organizations. So why is building alliances important? I would say there that you have to keep in mind that the EU institutions consider that they have limited resources, they want to be efficient, and therefore they love to deal with NGO coalitions who bring forward joint position to them. They love coalitions or simply also because it saves their time, and it also gives them the impression that you are stronger and that you are more legitimate. So it makes also your organization and your request more credible to them. So again, don't forget that the more organization you are together, working together, the more EU citizens, also potentially EU electors, you represent, which has some importance for them. So it is key not to duplicate the work of others. Again, we have all limited resources in the non-profit sector, so it's a lot of time and energy. And so it's really important to make sure that you add value. The issue of coordination with other civil society organizations working in similar issues is very important in order to be complementary or to act jointly. So this is something to assess on a case-by-case basis. And the last thing I want to say on that point is the role of the media. So the use of the media has to be carefully assessed. It should not destroy your lobbying activities or your good contacts with the institution. But when you are stuck, or sometimes even it can reinforce your advocacy. So it is they have to be used in a very strategic way because the institutions are very sensitive to their image in the public. Now we come to the last golden key, which is to evaluate your action, to evaluate if your actions were successful or not. Why? Because it allows you to follow up adequately. And why following up adequately? Because that's the way to make impact. So you need to evaluate, and for that you need to assess if you achieved the results you wanted with an action on the basis of clear indicators. I will not go into details on indicators. That's something which needs more time, but it is very important. And then on this basis, you can follow up, and if you succeeded, you can congratulate yourself for your achievement, of course, and then you can start working on the next objective according to the step-by-step approach. And if you did not succeed, unfortunately, then you have to evaluate what could be improved in order to readapt your advocacy. And things you can think of is, for instance, to change the target or keep the target, but change the message. And very importantly, if you get a promise for an EU representative, it's important to follow up quickly with him or her to make sure that the person implements its promises. And if you made a promise to an EU representative, for instance, to send him or her specific information, it is very important to do it quickly in order to maintain this trust. There are also different ways. For instance, if you get stuck with a person, then you can go to another person. So you can also advocate at different levels, and because like this, you are multiplying the possibilities of success. For instance, when I'm in different levels, it can be the political and the technical levels at the same time or in parallel. It can be with the EU institutions as well as with member states. It can be also with different EU institutions, which are so complementary work, or several bodies within a EU institution, etc. And again, don't forget that personal contacts are essential and that the success of your advocacy depends on a process and rarely on a single action. So now we gave you the full set of keys. And just to conclude, this is the end of the presentation. And so, now I give you the floor for the conclusions.
For the questions. So now, thank you for your attention during the short presentation. We have now a few minutes for questions. So we will answer briefly as many questions as possible within the limited time frame that we have. So if you do have questions, so we will answer to them as they come in. And if you do have questions that require a more detailed answer, we can always follow up with you and give you something a bit more specific after the webinar. Okay, so you can use the chat on your right-hand side to type the questions that you have. So thank you for your questions. I hope we have answered them all. Just to finalize one last slide. So as we have mentioned in the beginning, this webinar was a sort of a sneak preview into what we are preparing for you in our next open training that we are going to conduct in Brussels very, very soon. So it's training on EU advocacy, and we also hope to see you there. So just to talk a bit about what we are preparing for the workshop, the objective is to provide you with an overview of how the EU system works, how you can find your way in the EU labyrinth, and also to give participants really more detailed tools on how to develop and implement a successful advocacy strategy with the EU. So much more into detail than what we have done with this webinar, also because the time was much more limited. So for all of those deciding to join the training, we can also offer you a discount. So we also propose, besides this open training that we have, we also propose targeted in-house trainings, either as workshops or as e-learning courses on advocacy within the European Union. And these, what we call targeted trainings, are really tailor-made courses for any kind of civil society organization or foundation or group of civil society organizations who are working on similar issues, but who want to develop the efficiency of their advocacy work with the EU. So this is something really, really specific, really targeted and custom made. So you also have our contacts on the screen, and we'll also send you a follow-up email with the recording of this webinar in case you want to review it. We also have other free webinars on the way, so you can check them on our website, and you only need to register, just like you did for this one. So please do share them with your colleagues as well, in case you might know someone who might be interested. And the last thing we would like to ask is that if you think of any kind of webinars, any topics that you would like to see happening, just let us know, drop us a few lines, and we'll make them happen. Okay, so this is all for today. Thank you very much, Sandrine.
Thanks to you, Anna.
And we hope to see you all very, very soon. Have a great day.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks to you.